be fairly consistent about where on the creature's body these wet scales are sitting. And this creates a reference point for you, the viewer. And now I can bend and mess with that reference point, and as long as I'm consistent in the patterns I'm laying down, your eye will do a lot of the hard work. How's that? So I'm trying to get this bend of the body and how it twists here by creating an optical illusion with these patterns. And I'll get a little bolder about the closer I get to the head and the neck. Work for you? Now, I can go in there with a lot more detail, but the more detail I put into this part of the drawing, two things. The more likely I'm going to screw those patterns up, and you're going to see it right off. And the more I'm going to distract from the real focal point of my drawing, which is this creature's face. So I want to not put much information here. I want to put more information here. And part of not putting more information here is your imagination will fill in the very detail and twist in the form that I could so easily screw up with one or two wrong brush strokes or pen strokes. So instead, I'm going to focus on the part of the drawing that I really want you looking at, and that is this adorable Lake Memphremagog monster's face. I'm working on a book called The Vermont Monster Guide with my friend Joe Citro, and this is one of the drawings that I'm doing for that book. And curiously enough, Joe has turned up a number of sightings around Lake Memphremagog, which borders Vermont and Canada, which would seem to indicate more than one monster in the lake, because all the sightings seem to be such a different form. Now, for those people that don't believe in lake monsters, that kind of discrepancy suggests, see, there's really nothing there. But for someone like me, it suggests that A, there's more than one critter there over the years. Highly unlikely in a body of water that's only the size of Lake Memphremagog. It is a sizable lake, but it's nowhere near the size of Lake Champlain. And none of the lakes in Vermont are anywhere near the size of, say, Lake Erie or Lake Michigan. Or it suggests to the naturalist in me, because I've been collecting amphibians and reptiles since I was a little kid, that maybe it's a creature that's gone through a metamorphic life cycle, and people have seen it at different stages of its life cycle. And that's the approach Joe and I are going to take with a few of the illustrations. And I'm actually going to do one yellow like those Herbert S. Zim Golden Nature guides, where they would show the egg, and then the tadpole, and then the frog when it's still got the tail, and then the frog. And I'm going to propose a possible Memphremagog life cycle. Completely speculative, yes, but it'll be fun to draw.
Steve, do you draw them any differently if they're male or female?
Only way under the water over here, which I'm not going to do because this is family programming. So, actually, you know, I do. And it's a good question, because when I was doing my dinosaur comic Tyrant, the main character in the portion of the book that I completed, the first 4 issues, was a young female Tyrannosaurus Rex. And I did work out some approaches to how I was going to deal with trying to delineate between the genders. And one of the things I did was I had slimmer characteristics for the mother T-Rex, in part because she was a young mother, and in part because I wanted it to be a little more feminine. Readers of that series wouldn't have noticed it, because it wasn't until what would have been issue 5 that the father T-Rex turned up, and then it would have been more evident that I was giving the male Tyrannosaurus rex's, I guess what we'd call bigger bones, a big bone fellow. So I do think about that when I'm drawing. But in the case of a solo lake monster, I'm not going to worry about it. This could be a he or a she. But that's a good question, because if it's a she, then there's got to be a he around if there's more than one Lake Memphremagog monster. There we go. Okay, so you can see how, I mean, I'm not going to do much more detail on that body at this point. You know, once I get in with the pen, I'm probably going to do a little more around this part of the body by the water. But you can already see that as I lay in more scale patterns, the opportunity for screwing up becomes greater. So I'm going to stop with that at this point, because it does look round enough to me, and it does have the feeling of, you know, the kind of weight that a large snake like a python or a boa constrictor has. You know, they aren't perfectly round tubes that stay that way. If you've ever had one as a pet, or a friend of yours had one and you were able to handle one, you know, wherever their weighty part of their body is around your arm, it lays flatter, and, you know, when it's away from what it's holding on to, it becomes more cylindrical, and that's what I wanted to capture here. What I will do, though, is put a little more detail of scale pattern on this part of the body over here that's popping up out of the water. And again, I got to be careful. Too much can really screw things up. Not enough, and it will start to look like one of those sausage-like creatures that pop up in Marvel Comics, Conan comics, where they look like they've come out of a meatpacking plant, and there's no skeleton under there. Okay, now I'm going to put a little bit more time into this lakeshore, and this is a delicate point in the drawing. I want to put enough detail that it looks believable to you and has a sense of place and environment, but I really don't want to distract from that face. Part of what is pulling your eye to that face is this design, and the fact that I've got the diagonals that stop your eye from going further than the face. But part of it is, if I begin to put too much detail anywhere else in the drawing, that will cease to be a center of attention. Also notice I've got the eye directed in such a way that, as a bird or reptile will, it's sort of cocked its head so it's looking at you. It's harder to get eye contact with a reader with a non-mammal form, and that's why so many creatures tend to be anthropomorphized in comics or by illustrators, is that they're trying to get that sense of eye contact. But eye contact with a bird or a reptile is very much unlike eye contact with a person or a cat or a dog. If you really look at their eyes, they don't think the way we do. They're not looking at us the way we're looking at them. And you know, it's a whole different reality for them. And I try to capture that when I'm doing reptile or bird forms. Okay, that's about as much detail as I'm going to put there. So, one of the ways of not worrying about too much detail is I'm going to put another arrow to bring you down to this creature, and that is the shadow from this tree. You can see I'm really banging it in pretty loose, because any application of ink will look like the edge of a rock, and that's okay at this stage. There, that helps pull this drawing together quite a bit. And now it creates almost a frame for what I want you really looking at, which is this critter's face. That means I've also got to give a little bit of care with what I do back here. Okay, and that works pretty well for me. And I'm going to suggest increasingly flattened shale-like rock back here. And I'm not going to worry about being too specific with vegetative forms. I don't care whether this is grass or ferns or what up here. Ferns are really fun to draw, especially with brush, but firm textures would pull your eye away from the creature, and I don't want that. Okay, now